Hi, I would get comfortable. You can go. 2, 3, 4. Do 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 do. It's Wednesday. Oh, it's like angels came down. Picks of the week. Ba-da, ba-doo, ba-doo. So only 5 this week. I got a lot of reading done in this week and done in. I don't think that's how that works, but and hopefully I can keep it going. All I had to do was stop watching television and to give up on the notion that I'm supposed to watch WandaVision tomorrow. So don't anybody spoil it further. Anyway, so I went to the comic book store. You want to see what I got? Sure you do. First up, Proctor Valley Road #1 from the good people at Boom Studios. This is co-written by none other than Grant Morrison, and that's all I know. The name Alex Child, who is his co-writer on here, rings a faint bell. The odds are that Morrison himself probably just attached his name to this to help sell it. I'm sure he had some creative input as well, but as I think I've mentioned before anyway, a lot of the time when you see a bigger named writer attached to a writer whose name's not as well known, that's usually the case. The Warren down at the shop told me that this has kind of a Paper Girls vibe, which if you haven't read that, I would highly recommend. Written by Brian K. Vaughan and drawn by Cliff Chang. Frankly, I mean, I don't think I've never heard anybody say anything bad about Paper Girls, but Saga always seems like a more popular book. I seem to feel like, and again, I don't know where I'm getting this. I don't talk to anybody about comic books except for me and you. But, well, can you go grab my point? Go get it before, oh, it doesn't matter. All right. Also this week from the upstart Marvel Comics group, Children of Adam #1. I don't know what's happening in here, and that's the way I want to keep it. It's written by Vita Ayala, who is writing at least one of the other X books. There's so many that I get them all confused. But I've really enjoyed everybody who's been writing for the X books. Vita Ayala, Teenie Howard, Jerry Duggan, obviously I already liked him. Benjamin Percy. They're all really good. I don't know how much say Jonathan Hickman had in hiring them. I don't know why that would even matter, but here we are. From as near as I can tell, though, this is from like house ads and stuff, and from where the other stories are going. I believe these are youngins who are supposed to be sidekicks for the original X-Men. Other than that, I don't know, and I don't want to know yet until I've read it. This is why I don't go on Facebook anymore. Also this week, Nonstop Spider-Man #1. This is the first regular monthly Spider-Man title I've bought since Brian Bendis left the Ultimate Spider-Man. Is that right? And technically that Ultimate Spider-Man is not canon because it's not in the 616. It is in the... What's the Ultimate Universe again? 1090? Or something like that? 1610? I think it's 1610. So I don't know much about this book either, except that it's Peter Parker Spider-Man, I'm pretty sure. And it's, as near as I can tell, expressly created so that there is a more action-packed, non-continuity Spider-Man to get people like me who would like to read Spider-Man but don't really want to go into the whole... Like, currently on Amazing Spider-Man, which to my knowledge is the only other Spider title starring Peter Parker. Nick Spencer's been writing that for a few years now, ever since Dan Slott ended his oft controversial run on the book, which lasted years and years and years. I think Spencer's probably been on there about 4 years now, and I think Slott was on for a good 7, something like that. I really enjoy Dan Slott's work, but I did not read the bulk of his run because it was all post Brand New Day, which was the storyline that kind of just killed any interest in Peter Parker Spider-Man for me. But that was 14 years ago, so I've been kind of itching for this. The last Peter Parker Spider-Man book I read on the reg was Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man, which was mostly written by Peter David, I believe. And that was the main reason I had even picked it up. Because I feel like I'm definitely. Well, hell, like I said, get comfortable. So, The Amazing Spider-Man is the core Spider-Man title. That's from the 60s. And then in the 70s, they introduced Peter Parker, the Spectacular Spider-Man, which was eventually shortened to just Spectacular Spider-Man, that was one of my first books, as was Web of Spider-Man. So when I was a kid, those were the 3 Spider-Man titles. And then Todd McFarlane came along, and he had done so well on Amazing Spider-Man, they gave him his own Spider-Man book, which was called Simply Spider-Man. No, Simply, it was just Spider-Man. And Simply Spider-Man is the musical theater version. That was the Broadway play that didn't do too good. No, that was called Turn Off the Dark. And you should read that book. Sorry. I kind of lost track of Spider-Man after that. There was the Marvel Knights Spider-Man title that Mark Millar wrote for a minute. There was... Amazing has never stopped, really. They renumber things every now and again, but it's pretty much been the same book. The main Spider-Man book. Spectacular got canceled by the end of the 90s. I don't even know how long Web of Spider-Man lasted. And those are 2 titles that I'm still kind of I'm not buying a lot of back issues these days, but those are titles that I still collect. And then, so I guess it must have been around 05, 06 that Friendly Neighborhood started. And so that was the Spider-Man title that I was reading, not counting Ultimate Spider-Man. And I think there was 2 other Spider-Man titles, Amazing and I can't remember the other one now. But after Brand New Day, where the thumbnail is they kind of retconned everything, so everything got taken back to like 1986. Peter and Mary Jane are no longer married. Aunt May is alive and well. He was using his web shooters again because they had brought the character in line with the Tobey Maguire movies more to where the webs actually came out of his wrists. Again, I think I've mentioned this before. I used to get annoyed by that sort of thing, but the way they did it in the books for Spider-Man was really well done. And so I was like, okay, hats off. And now I've gotten to a point where I don't really care anymore. And I kind of just have accepted that the movies are now the main event. Nobody reads funny books anymore. So whenever the movies are popular, they're going to make it into the funny. I get it. It's not my favorite, but I get it. That brings me to this. So now we have this title, which is written by Joe Kelly, who's a great writer who wrote Deadpool for a long time. I think I always get him confused with somebody else, though. It's drawn by Chris Bachalo, who's been one of my favorites since I was a teenager as well, and who really should be working for Marvel at all times. I never understand when he's not drawing for Marvel why he wouldn't be. Humberto Ramos, I was about to say he's drawing Strange Academy, but that's Humberto Ramos. They have a similar style, but not that similar. So this will be fun. I'm looking forward to it. Maybe it'll only last a few issues. I'm also fine with that. And then finally from Marvel, I also got Thor and Loki: Double Trouble #1. This was, I think my eyes just kind of glossed over it the first few times I saw ads for it because it looks like more, like it's aimed towards children more. But I think that's just Gurihiru's art style. So this is the reason I bought this is because it's written by Mariko Tamaki, who co-wrote This One Summer, and who's also, gosh, what was that other? I want to say there was a regular title she wrote She-Hulk for Marvel for a minute a couple of years ago, and that was a really good She-Hulk series. And so now she's writing this. And Gurihiru, who I've mentioned before, is actually 2 young Japanese ladies who are very good comic book artists. And in fact, just this morning, I started reading on the Marvel app Gwenpool, which is a character I had only... It's a fairly new character. I think she was created like 2014, 2015. And she was first featured in that Howard the Duck run, which I believe Zdarsky and or Christopher Hastings were writing. And for whatever reason at the time, I just wasn't buying it. It was one of the very few. And I I guess I wasn't working at the shop as much, if at all. There was like a whole 9 months where I wasn't working there. I was just shopping there. But Gurihiru draws Gwenpool, and they're really good artists, and it's a really fun book. That's a whole other story. So that'll be fun. That's probably just a mini for sure. And then finally this week, I got Captain Ginger Volume 1. This is a book from the good people at Ahoy Comics, who publish the title Happy Hour. which is written by Peter Milligan, who's been one of my favorites since I was a kid. And they have all these really cool ads. And I mean, and I've been saying this, Warren and I have been having this discussion for the last couple of years. Indie books are getting better and better. So there are all these ads in the back of Happy Hour. So I just emailed him. I was like, hey, order me some of these trades. And this is one of them. I don't know what this is. It's definitely a funny animal book with, you know, it's like a space opera, but with cats, which I'm always for that sort of thing. It's not I think Funny Animal is technically more like Usagi Yojimbo would be Funny Animal, but it's in the same general area. It also looks a lot, and it reminded me a lot of Black Sad, which I don't think I've ever mentioned that here. Black Sad is an Italian or Spanish comic, and it's not unlike this, but it's way more Disney, but not in a lame commercial way. Black Sad looks... Do I have those in here? I think they're out there. Black Sad is a Private Eye comic, but all the characters are animals, and Black Sad is a Black Panther, if I'm not mistaken, the title character. And the art is unbelievable. It's very, like, it looks like, to me anyway, early 70s Disney, or like like post-Walt, like Jungle Book, that era. I would say from Jungle Book to Robin Hood is kind of the era I'm thinking of. And I'm not even a super duper Disney nerd, but I know enough about animation and stuff and art to be able to kind of go, oh, right, that's from this era. And that's what Black Sad looks like. And Captain Ginger kind of looks like that too. And so that will be fun. And then when I'm done reading, I'm not going to finish reading those and then do these. That would take a week. I don't want battling it out. All right, so last week I showed you like 7 fucking books. Yeah. Hoping that more than one would be a piece of poop so I wouldn't have to buy it anymore. Not this week. First up was Berserker by Keanu Reeves and Matt Kindt and drawn by Ron Garney. This was super duper fun. I don't know if I've mentioned as much, but Matt Kindt, despite the fact that he's like an indie darling, he's definitely has a real eye for action, for what and I think with Bang, he made it pretty clear with that too, and I'm pretty sure I mentioned it then. This book is super violent, and it was so much fun. So Keanu Reeves' character is an immortal, and he doesn't have much direction in life, so he ends up being an assassin for the United States government, like a black ops type thing. So this whole issue is just him violently dispatching many, soldiers to their reward to Valhalla, and it's brutal. And I'd also forgotten how, I don't think I'd forgotten, but it's been a little while since I've read anything by Ron Garney, and boy, oh boy, he's only getting better with age. That's not a nice way to say that. So this is super duper fun. I'm really looking forward to the rest of this. I also read Dead Dog's Bite #1 from Dark Horse, like I was telling you before, is written and drawn by Tyler Boss, who drew another book that I can't remember now, but that I did like. And now I'm having a little trouble remembering what happened in this. This was also, like I say, though, oh, that's right. This is very surreal. It's got a very Twin Peaks vibe to it. I only saw the first season. And the art, Tyler Boss's art is pretty, in this, maybe it's just the tone, but it's definitely got a Chris Ware vibe to it. It's a pretty straightforward, like Twin Peaks, it's like a straightforward murder mystery, but then it's not at all straightforward. There's all kinds of weird things going on. Quirky things, even. So I'm definitely looking forward to that. Also by Matt Kindt this week, I read ENIAC #1. This is also drawn by Dougie Braithwaite, who's also not lost a step in the 40 years he's been working now, 30, something like that. This is even more than Berserker. Like, aside from the fact that Matt Kindt is very good at writing action sequences and action comics, adventure, he's very, like, I think that's what I'm getting at. Matt Kindt has got a real love for Golden Age pulp stuff. But not in the way, like, a lot of times when you see, and at least when I see creators trying to go for, like, a Doc Savage type thing, they always they're more enamored of the era and of the language of that era than they are so much the action and adventure. So Kindt does away with all that. Like, when you read Matt Kindt stuff, it feels like it was. It's all taking place in the 40s for the most part. This does too, but it's clearly been written in the 21st century. And I don't know a better way to put it, but it's really something. And you see this a lot in like Yellow. What is it? Yellow Peril? Is that what it's called? You see it a lot in Two Sisters, Super Spy, which is probably still my favorite Matt Kindt book, but also Mind Management and Department H. Like he's always doing stuff. And I've said this before. He's got a very Wes Anderson kind of deal going with that. Now, ENIAC here is exactly what I'm talking about. So the ENIAC itself is this supercomputer that was invented during World War II, and unbeknownst to the world at large, it has more or less been running things. Not running things, but it's definitely, it was brought online by the Americans during World War II, and we find out in this book that it bombed Nagasaki and not the United States. Truman said, "Go ahead with Hiroshima," and ENIAC went, "You know what? We're gonna do a twofer." So now they have this artificial intelligence that, like most artificial intelligences, wants to destroy us. So these two mercenaries are tasked with finding and assassinating ENIAC once and for all, and woo! So you have like this real steampunk vibe to it too. So this is the inventor of ENIAC who's been taken over by the machinery. I don't think this actually takes place in the book, but it's a very good cover. So that's another one. I mean, Matt Kindt, I'm always going to buy it. This one I could probably do without, but I'm probably going to keep picking up. This is James Bond, Agent of Spectre, and this, I had a funny feeling, and I was right. Dynamite got the James Bond franchise license, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago, I want to say. Yeah, probably 2014, 2015. And they've just been kind of steadily putting books out. And they've all been pretty high quality, the ones that I've read anyway. Because they would have really good writers and artists. And they've done things like they gave Felix Leiter a spinoff, Leitner? James Bond's American sort of counterpart, who I don't think is in any of the movies, but he's in a bunch of the novels. And they gave him a series. I think Kieran Gillen wrote it for a while. I think Greg Rucka might have written it for a while. And like I was saying last week, this is written by Christos Gage, who I hadn't read anything comic book wise, or anything for that matter, in a long time. So in this story, this is still also, I think this is why a lot of these stories take place in the early formative years of Agent 007 because of what's the pretty boy he's playing in James Bond now? No, he's not English. They're never English. What are you talking about? What's his name? I can't remember his name. Daniel something. Craig, right? Since all those movies are all sort of prequels in a way, like they all take place at the very beginning of it. Blofeld shows up in this, and as one of the leaders of Spectre, who is MI5's opposite, and he enlists Jim here to work for Spectre, and so it's pretty cool. It's pretty innovative, I will say. Also, boy, let's keep going. Jonna and the Impossible Monsters. This was really good, super fun, and I'm looking forward to it. My worry was that there were going to be too many splash pages and 2-page spreads. It took me 30 seconds to read, but it was still very enjoyable. And looking at Chris Samney's art, especially when he's writing his own script, obviously he can draw in as many splash pages and 2-page spreads as he wants. So in this book, I believe it's in a indeterminate sort of time. So it feels kind of post-apocalypsy, but it also could be like a fantastical setting. Jonna, the title character here, is monsters have landed on Earth or whatever planet it takes place on, and everybody's been destitute. That's the apocalyptic part. Jonna has gone missing, and her older sister is trying to find her. And there's some connection between Jonna and the monsters who have invaded Earth. We haven't found out what yet. So and this is going to sound, I don't mean this to sound critical, but I'm not buying it for the story. It's because Chris Samney is a great artist. Also read Swamp Thing #1. I could probably get the rest of these, but I'm not going to, because for one thing, my shop hates ordering comics from DC, and I don't particularly blame him, although it is a very weird thing for a retailer to do. The art in this is really good. It's Mike Perkins, whose name I know from something else. And Ram V as the writer is also really good, who's mostly worked for DC, so I'm not as familiar with his work. This is and I think I mentioned this because it's part of the Infinite Frontier, which I don't know what that means. They were doing those future state books for a minute. I don't know. I think these tie into that, but Swamp Thing in this is not what the fuck is Swamp Thing's name? Alec. What's Swamp Thing's name, for Christ's sake? It's not the original. It's a new guy who I read, and I think I talked about this earlier. There's a Swamp Thing special where he comes in, and now he's the new Swamp Thing, and this continues from that. Yeah, I mean, clearly I don't really sound like I'm that into it. So, I mean, I might buy the rest of it. I might wait for the trade. Who knows? This one I won't. I will buy the next one, although this was about the same. This is Demon Days X-Men #1 by Peach Momoko. Peach Momoko, and this was, I told that whole story about Cebulski last week, but this is not the first time that Marvel has taken their, characters and put them in a Japanese setting. So this is like an alternate universe where this is Psylocke, who is like a Ronin, and she travels with a dog companion named Logan. And they fight the Red Oni, which is the Hulk. And yeah, so basically taking Japanese folktales and putting Marvel Comics characters into them. It's fun. I'll keep buying it. Peach Momoko is a great artist. It's not anything I couldn't live without, though. But it's only and this is a one-shot. The next issue is going to be a different franchise like Spider-Man or somebody, and that'll be another #1. So, the bulk of what I read this week, though, I am very excited to share with you. And I think I showed this off when it came in the mail, but I also finished this week True Believer, The Rise and Fall of Stan Lee by Abraham Reisman. Could not put it down. And I knew most of this stuff, but it was still just fascinating to read again. The elevator pitch quote that I would choose is from former Spider-Man writer and all-around comic book legend Jerry Conway, co-creator of The Punisher, and who was the first guy to take over Spider-Man after Stan, I believe. Maybe Roy Thomas wrote it for a minute, but Jerry Conway was one of the early second wave. When you had, at Marvel, you had Stan and Jack, who hated each other, and then Roy Thomas came in and kind of became the first editor-in-chief after Stan, and then that was when the first wave of fanboys like Marv Wolfman and Len Wein and Jerry Conway came in and started working for Marvel, and they were all in their 20s. So, Jerry, there's a lot of not great stories about Stan in here, but the way Jerry Conway kind of puts it is he tells a story about something shitty that Stan did to him, and when Reisman asked him to kind of, what that's not, Jerry Conway said, Stan was a good guy. He was not a great guy. And I think that's pretty... There's also an excellent... they talk to Mark Evanier a lot, who, aside from just being a comics historian and legend unto himself, was one of Jack Kirby's assistants when he was in high school, when Mark was in high school, not Jack Kirby. And so he's got all kinds of stories about Stan from Jack's perspective, and so he tells a couple great ones that I had not heard before. That's the thing about this, is this book is full of stories that I did know. It's full of, he talks to all what I would consider the obvious, like Roy Thomas and Jerry Conway and Mark Evanier. But he also interviews in depth Larry Lieber, I've never read an interview with Larry Lieber. Larry Lieber was one of the original writers on Thor, and he wrote the Spider-Man comic strip for a while, or drew it. He would work semi-regularly for Marvel Comics certainly throughout Stan's reign. And also he was Stan's little brother. But Stan treated him like complete garbage. It's really messed up. I had no idea how bad Larry had it. I do remember as a kid, when I was in my 20s, but I realized, I was like, oh, Larry Lieber. That's Stan's name. But Larry's the one who stayed Jewish. What else is in this book? I don't know. I can't, if you read the Marvel the Untold Story on my Say So. This is a lot more, not of the same, but it is very objective. I mean, the guy, that's the other thing too, because I think this is true. This is true with a lot of biographies of men that I admire, people, but usually men. Because most of my heroes are kind of shitheads, as it turns out. I don't know where I got that from, but I do appreciate when people are kind of complicated, when they're not just so one way or the other. So I love Stan Lee. I never will not love Stan Lee, but of my personal troika, which is Stan Lee, Jack Kirby, and Steve Ditko, only two of those guys I respect as artists. And one of them I respect more as a huckster. But I don't mean that to sound negative, even though I know it does. All right, that was Pixel Blast. Good. I hope you were comfortable. I'm going to go eat lunch now because oddly enough, I'm starving after all that. Go make me a sandwich, please. I said please.